I'm delighted to say Martin Lipton is with us this morning to talk to us a bit about what's going on with the COVID situation, a bit about Spurs and a bit about Arsenal as well. If you've any questions for him, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Martin, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm okay, actually, despite another grey, miserable day, but never mind, that's London for you.
Well, there you go. And is the game going to happen tonight? It looks at this stage like it will happen, although it seems like nobody really wants it to happen.
Well, it appears to be on. Leicester don't want it on. Spurs don't want it on. Don't think any of the fans want it on. Not sure anyone wants it on, but the Premier League do want it on, and therefore it's going to go ahead. They are determined and desperate to get games through. There does appear to be a sort of a rule in place, just that no one will officially say what it is, because if they don't say what it is directly, that gives them leeway to go around it. But effectively, if your training ground is open and you've got fewer than 10 first-team players who are out, unless all your goalkeepers are out, your match is going to be played.
Look, it's obviously a rock and a hard place because the season is shortened and the World Cup in winter next year means the summer break is going to be less, a few weeks, and there's all sorts of other complications. There's all those extra games in Europe for these teams now. So I have some sympathy with the Premier League trying to get the games through. What's the general sense amongst you and your football colleagues about how well or otherwise this is being handled at the moment? I
actually think that some of the moans are a bit silly from certain managers. But in the case of the game tonight, given that Leicester are going to be struggling to get a team together, there's no doubt about that. They've got no centre-halves. Spurs are still suffering from COVID. I mean, the likes of, I think, Son and Moura are unlikely to be available, is my understanding, because they were, I'm told, amongst the ones who went down. So Spurs are going to be at less than full strength either. And Spurs could have played that game against Rennes, which would have got them off the hook with UEFA. And it would have served both teams' purposes quite well. And I don't think that would have been a terrible decision. However, I do see where the Premier League are at, in that they want to get games away. I think the problem is this lack of clarity officially as to what the rules are and regulations, because there are fixed rules in the Premier League handbook, but they don't appear to be followed necessarily.
That's, I suppose, one of the joys of being in charge of your own competition, is you get to make the rules up as you go along. Not great for the teams because they don't really know how to prepare for it then.
No, exactly. And it's an issue. No, we know that. I mean, Dean Smith was claiming yesterday that the Premier League wouldn't talk to Norwich. I'm told that there was no request made by Norwich. But, I mean, there you go. You see, we have lots of different viewpoints being expressed by different people. But the prime thing for the Premier League is to get the games played. They don't want a slew of matches being off. They don't want to decimate the programme, particularly now when there's so many games. And as you know, December and the Christmas period is perhaps the Premier League's biggest sell to its overseas customers, because it's the only league in the world, major league, that's playing football over that period as a rule, or one of very, very few. So the last thing that the Premier League wants is to have to say to NBC and whoever else it has broadcasting across the globe, sorry, no football. It's a big issue. There's the financial element as well. If the matches are postponed, and a lot of them, then there'll be demands for rebates from the broadcasters. They paid an exceeding amount of money for certain games at certain times. And obviously the clubs all want the money. And sometimes you've got to accept the downside of being part of a money-making machine.
It does seem as well that there is another consequence of this, and it's the acceleration of injuries at the moment. That, as you mentioned there, if you have X amount of players available to you, you must fulfil that fixture. But that doesn't take into account the fact that some of the X amount of players could be high injury risks. Like that's a situation that Leicester have had with Soyuncu, who, according to The Athletic, I think, were saying that the medical staff had assessed that he was going to be a high injury risk before the Newcastle game, and he'd been playing at his physical limits for a few weeks. And against Newcastle, he eventually does pull up with a hamstring injury, and he's going to be missing, as you said. They've got no centre backs for this week's game. So, I mean, there's a sense here that clubs aren't releasing full information about who's actually got COVID, but I'm sure our medical departments are pulling their hair out at the moment, because those players who are available who don't have COVID could potentially be at their limit as well.
Well, indeed. I mean, Johnny Evans started the game, having been injured, didn't last more than 5 minutes, did he, on Sunday? However, injuries are part of football. Suspensions are part of football. How often do you get it? If you get one injured player in one department, you end up with three. West Ham lost two centre-halves in a couple of weeks. they hadn't played in the European matches. They just played in the league, you know. So, unfortunately, injuries, key players do tend to happen, particularly as the season wears on because of the weight of fixtures. So all of these elements are part of it. And I do have a little bit of sympathy for the Premier League in that they do have a competition to run. But then again, I'm not having moans from clubs about players getting injured when they voted against 5 substitutes. And most of the smaller clubs did. One of the ways to ameliorate the injury situation is to have more replacements. They chose not to have it and are now moaning about a number of injuries when they opposed 5 substitutes. Well, bite a bit.
Jurgen Klopp is wondering why we can't know the identity of the players who test positive. What's your take on that?
Well, when Liverpool start putting out the names, that's fine, and then he can tell everybody else to, because at some point Liverpool will be, unfortunately, victims of this. It's a reality. Everyone's going to get it at some point. Let every club do it, but you can't say every club should do it, and if you haven't yourself, you know. And I'm not sure what's going on at Liverpool. Personally, I think there's a degree of, I think the fans would like to know who's out, but there is a degree of privacy about personal medical situations. Would you want to tell everybody in the whole of the Irish broadcasting system when you were ill?
Well, it became a big thing here that there was everybody who got it told everybody really quickly because it was like a great story at the start of COVID. Now everybody's kind of bored of it. So I do understand that there is that element of it. It seems some other sports have released players. I guess it seems like what Klopp is hinting at is that this might be handy for some managers and teams down the road to be able to say, oh, a bunch of our players. But I presume that there is documentation provided to the Premier League that there is an evidence of.
Tested by phonetics who are Premier League, who are employed by the Premier League to carry out the tests.
So there's no subterfuge going on or possible.
It's an outside company that carries out all the tests on behalf of the Premier League, and then those results are reported to the Premier League at the same time as they're reported to the clubs.
Right.
That's the way it works. So there isn't anything going. The issue is whether or not there's a consistency in the approach to matches being postponed, not on the integrity of the testing mechanism, as far as I'm aware. And so nobody, it seems to me, should be questioning that. It's whether or not the rules are being applied equally to all clubs. That is the concern of Leicester. They feel that they're being harshly, unfairly asked to play. What I would say is their training ground has remained open. Had their training ground been closed, and that's a decision that clubs don't make, that Public Health England or Wales or wherever it might be, that appears to be, although not officially, the determinant. If there's a lack of, if the outbreak is said to be out of control by the Public Health Authority, that appears to be the clincher.
Okay, let's talk football, right? Because it's obviously more interesting at this point. We'll talk Spurs in a minute, because I just want to reflect a little bit on where Arsenal are at the moment and the Aubameyang situation. Obviously, the list of missteps that Arsenal have made in their appointment of captains over the last decade has become essentially an internet meme over the last 48 hours, where people have just listed off everybody and gone, Aubameyang, the latest in a long list of them. Is there maybe a slight difference in that Arteta is actually finally dealing with this, and that maybe the penny has dropped at the club, that actually you can't just put your best player or the one who is most important or the one who is highest paid as captain, and that maybe finally some strategy is beginning to emerge?
If he was scoring goals and playing well, he would still be captain, I suspect. The fact is, he's been playing like a drain. I wrote a piece last week after one of the games, and I basically, it was Everton, I think, and just said, look, it's time that they're getting in an Ozil situation with him now. He's overpaid. He doesn't want to be there. He's infesting the rest of the dressing room, and actually the best thing they would do would be to staunch the flow of blood, cut off the wound and get rid. I wasn't sure they were going to do that, but I suspect that Mikel Arteta doesn't read my column, but nevertheless, that appears to be what he's decided to do. And that this trip to France or wherever it was, not quite sure where he went, and he allegedly came home late. I don't know the truth of that, but it appears to be the straw that broke the camel's back as far as Arsenal are concerned. But would they have been looking for that if he'd scored in the last 7 games? I doubt it. If he'd scored that last-minute goal when he should have scored against Everton, I doubt it. Sometimes if you're playing badly, people are looking for things which they don't look for if you're playing well.
I mean, fair point, right? and the fact that they are actually, it looks like, staunching the blood flow, what kind of an impact will that have? What is the possibilities here in terms of, it's a very young squad, very impressionable, very talented, and all of a sudden they're in the top four. Could it be a big moment for this team to actually get rid of something like that?
Well, they haven't played an away game the last couple, have they? So that's the judge of... Arsenal home record, fantastic. They keep on winning. Away record, it's not so clever, is it? Let's be brutally honest here. It's been poor. They are a real Jekyll and Hyde side at the moment. I can't work out whether they're any good, no good, or the same as last year. A little bit of me thinks it's probably the third of that. They're pretty much the same as last year. They're going to beat everyone they should beat and lose to everyone they should lose to. And if they get a good run of fixtures, they'll win a few matches, and then they get pumped as they were at Liverpool, and they were beaten at United, and they disappeared in the second half at Everton. And Everton are, let us be honest, a really poor side at the moment and in serious trouble. And they're at Leeds on Sunday. Leeds are in a right mess at the moment. If Arsenal go to Leeds and play well and win, then it's a different question to ask than it is if they go there, play as abysmally as they have in their recent away games, and lose them again, because that'll be 4 on the spin. So it is hard to work out what they do have. Unquestionably, is some really good players. I think Saka is an outstanding player. Smith Rowe is developing into a very, very good player. I've always believed that Lacazette actually was a better striker than Aubameyang. I never quite understood why this fating of Aubameyang, when I always thought, yeah, he scored a few goals, but his movement's a bit lax. Lacazette, I think, I like him. I have to say, I think he's a very good player, but he wants to leave. He's out of contract at the end of the season. I'm not sure about Odegaard still, but there you go. Partey, a lot of Arsenal fans think he's too slow and doesn't move the ball. None of them really wanted to have Xhaka back in the team. Both the left-backs are doing quite well, but only one of them can play. And Tierney's in the team at the moment. The two centre-halves, I think they've got a good physicality mix there. And White is growing into being a real player, which I thought he was going to be at Brighton. That's positive. The right-back looks a really good player. He's very swiftly acclimatised to English football. And Ramsdale, having been keeper in two of the worst teams in the Premier League in the last few years, has been excellent. Made a series of top-class saves, and rightly in a serious equation now for England starting jersey. So there's some very good players there, without question. I'm still not quite sure what they are, though.
Is that lack of consistency down to the age profile of the team? Is it down to the manager, Martin? What do you put that down to at the moment?
I think young players are always going to be more inconsistent than more experienced players, yes. The manager's had quite a long time in the job now, relative. You know, he should be starting to find his feet. Is he? Maybe he is. Maybe Arsenal are back, as it were. But I don't know. And if anyone tells you they do know, they're either remarkably self-assured or they're bluffing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the reality. And in 3 months' time, I think we'll be able to do a much better assessment. And it could well be in 3 months' time, in February, March, saying, you know what, Arsenal are going to finish fourth. They're a really good team. They've got over Aubameyang. They've got everything sorted. They're going in the right direction. Arteta's found his feet. He's found his leadership. The players want to play for him. They're going to be fantastic. Or we'll say, same again. Same again, 7th, 8th, not quite good enough. But we don't know.
The question then is kind of what the teams below them are going to do. And Manchester United and Tottenham, it definitely felt a couple of weeks ago when Arsenal were going through that sticky patch. Certainly after the Everton games, there was a possibility that those two clubs in particular, if they got their act together, would open up a gap on Arsenal. Again, we just don't know what's going to happen with Arsenal over the next little while. But is your gut feeling that under Ranić and Conte, that Man United and Tottenham will have that maturity and show that consistency that perhaps Arsenal won't show to be the real runners for that fourth spot?
I think United are favourites for fourth.
Yeah.
Still. But let's see what they do in the next couple of months. We're still a little bit of the halo effect of both managers, aren't we, really? Both Ranić and Conte have only been there for a few weeks, even fewer weeks in terms of Ranić at Germany, United rather. But I do think that United have got a lot of talent, and they got Ronaldo, who tends to score goals. He's quite good, this bloke. I hear he's getting on a bit, but he's still an incredible goal-scoring machine. They've still got Bruno Fernandes, they've still got Greenwood, they've still got Rashford to score goals. They might want to get someone in central midfield who can pass the ball better than McTominay and Fred, but that's another issue. I suspect they will do if they get rid of Pogba, because there'll be a massive amount off the wage book. Might be looking at right-backs as well. I don't think that Wan-Bissaka's pulling up any trees. But De Gea's making saves again, which he wasn't a few months ago. And United, I think, are a more rounded squad. And also they seem to have a bit more discipline about them as a unit now than they did a few weeks ago. As for Spurs, well, if Kane started scoring goals, it would make a difference, wouldn't it? They got to where they are without the centre forward and best player scoring a goal. One goal all season in the Premier League. Now, Harry Kane will start scoring again. We know that. He's just having one of those dips. And once he starts scoring, if Son stays fit and is scoring, and Moura plays like he is at the moment, then Spurs are dangerous against anybody. Unfortunately, they're dangerous against themselves. I'm still not sure of Emerson, the right back. I saw him the other week. I went to the game with my son, and we both looked at each other and thought, he can't play, can he? He's just not very good. They haven't got a midfielder who can pass the ball. They've got two really, really grafting midfielders in Skip and Hobart. Work hard, run hard, tackle, but neither of them can play a defence splitting pass. It's not in their weaponry. So I think Spurs are still short. But if they are to, give 3 or 4 players to Conte in January, including a midfield passer, including a centre half, including another striker option, with half a season to go, you would imagine they would be with Arsenal and United and still potentially West Ham live contenders for 4th. But that's all they can be, because the other 3 are well clear, well better, even though Chelsea are in a bit of a blip at the moment. That last-minute penalty, I think, has done them a world of good against Leeds. The top 3 are different league to the rest. Let's be brutally honest about it. Let's be fair. The top 3 in England are probably the top 3 in Europe.
That central striker option that you mentioned there, or backup to maybe Harry Kane, or potentially someone to play alongside Harry Kane or ahead of him, is going to be really interesting. And the name that's constantly linked with Tottenham is Dusan Vlahovic from Fiorentina. And I'm not sure how much you've heard about any legitimate links to this guy, but Arsenal, Manchester United, Tottenham are the clubs linked with him. It could just be speculation, but I'm not sure, Martin, have you considered this, and whether or not Spurs are going to look for somebody of this calibre in a number 9 signing in January?
I think they are ready to make a big status signing.
Right.
I think Conte is pressing them. I think Paratici is aware of that and is telling Daniel Levy. And Spurs have, despite the stadium debt, which is astronomical, but because of the way it's been scheduled at only £17 million a year in repayment, and the club this year will gross somewhere in the region of 500 million, between 450 and 500 million, with the stadium back on full blast this season. They're in a position where they can spend the money. Whether they choose to is another matter. But I think there's an acceptance that this squad needs fairly radical measures over the next 2 windows. So that next season, when it starts with under Conte, they're in a position to genuinely challenge for the top 4, if not better than that. They're not. If this season, if they were finishing 4th, it would be by default of others as much as by action of themselves. And there's an awareness and willingness, it seems to me, to address that. The squad's got old together, hasn't it? And it looks like Dele Alli will finally be leaving in January. If they can find someone to take him off their hands, there'll be others as well, because I think that it needs a change.
Are Spurs fans genuinely sad about what happened to Dele Alli, or do they care anymore because it's been so long since he's been relevant?
I hope they really care. I hope that any proper fan will say to Dele Alli, it's not working here anymore. It did for 2 or 3 years. You were outstanding. Go away and find yourself and come, and be a footballer again. Be yourself. Be the player you should be, because you shouldn't want a player to fail. Not one of your own team. And he was the first 3 years at Spurs. He was a revelation, wasn't he? He was absolutely outstanding, scoring goals, creating goals, doing things that you didn't expect, showing that devil, wanting to win the ball. He had 3 outstanding years. And ever since then, probably since the World Cup, you could argue, and certainly since 2018, the end of the 2018-19 season, because he played okay-ish at times in that Champions League run. For 2 years, he's not been there. He's been a ghost. And there was that quote from Mourinho, which was quite brutal. You Dele or Dele's brother. I think it's a fair question to ask, actually.
What was his best position?
I think it's playing off the striker, running in behind. That worked when Spurs played with a 3. Actually, that was when he was at his best, because you had it was various lines, wasn't it? It was a back 2, but Dyer dropped in with fullbacks pushing into midfield alongside Dembele, who gave them so much physicality and strength. And then you had the attacking 4 or 5, and he was one of those. And he was able to make runs without having to do too much defensive work. He was able to gamble, and he would get in behind because defenders were scared of Kane and worried about Kane and drew to Kane, which left space behind, and he took advantage of that.
So kind of an attacking midfielder, or not quite a number 10, because he's not a...
No, not a 10, but just behind. I don't know whether that would be a 10 minus or something like that.
Yeah, an 8-star or something like that. What's the story with Kane? What are the range of outcomes here at the moment? Like, let's assume, I don't know, do we assume he just does start scoring goals again? That's automatically going to happen?
Well, given the number of goals he's scored not for Spurs this season, or for Spurs not in the Premier League this season, it's pretty clear. He's still got 18 goals. Just only scored 1 in the Premier League. He scored all those goals in it. Now, I know one of the games was San Marino, but he scored that incredible goal against Poland. He knows how to score. He hasn't forgotten. And the last couple of games, he's looked actually much sharper. The Norwich game, he could have scored 4. The one that went just wide, he doesn't try the shot if he doesn't back himself to score. So it's just a question of when it goes in, I think. And the second goal against Norwich came from his snapshot from the edge of the box, which the keeper did really well to push aside, and they scored from the corner. He isn't playing that bad. He's just not scoring goals. The Brentford game I went to, the 2 best passes of the night were played by Harry Kane. Instant balls, controlled, bang, splaying into space. Nobody else on the pitch could have played that pass. He's just not put the ball in the net. But, all great players have periods when it doesn't happen, and then it starts happening again. I don't think anyone at Spurs doubts Harry Kane's going to start scoring again. And if anyone does doubt that, then they're idiots.
And has all the talk of him leaving disappeared with the arrival of Conte? Is that now a story that is finished? Harry Kane will be happy to play at Spurs under Conte?
I don't know for certain, but that's all the mood music you're getting, that he suddenly realises that Spurs are serious. I don't think he ever really wanted to leave, but he wanted to play for a Spurs team that were going to be challenging, and didn't think they were going to be challenging with the managers they were talking about who were selected. If Conte had been given the job in the summer, I think the desire to move question would have disappeared pretty swiftly then. But it didn't, because of what happened, and he didn't want to play for Nuno. He thought he was not the sort of manager to take them forward, and guess what? He was right. But then again, there's a lot of us saying that it was a bad appointment at the time and thinking it couldn't last, and we were right. However, he is ambitious to win trophies. And if he looks across and he looks in the summer and thinks, you know what, these signings are rubbish, they're not very good, then you can see him pushing again. I think in his heart of hearts, he would love to win a trophy with Tottenham Hotspur. But the primary goal for him is to win trophies. And if it's not going to happen at Tottenham, and he sees it's not going to happen, then he'll look again to move, because he knows that he'll be defined, like every player is at some point, by what you win and not just who you play for.
It's a very interesting period in his career. Like, the arrival of Conte, I suspect, will give him a pause for thought. And this transfer window and the next transfer window are, I suspect, going to ultimately decide whether or not he pitches in and commits to it. The England jersey over your shoulder there, number 20, is that Phil Foden from the Euros?
No, it's Wayne Rooney, actually. No, it's me. It was to celebrate 20 years of covering England, but it was it was presented to me by Rooney. In 2014, when I was younger and had hair and had a future, as opposed to having no hair and I'm old and I've just got a past. But and now I'm actually the last England game in San Marino, I was back covering them, but that was because of COVID absentee, so it's not the norm. But no, it was a celebration of my departure from one role into another.
Very good. It looks like it's shirt worn. Are they grass stains on the front?
No, it's just there's signatures, actually.
Okay, very good, very good.
But it's such a big room. No, it's not. It's a very small room.
Martin, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million. Cheers. Martin Lipton there giving us his thoughts. Do you think Harry Kane's going to stick around now?
You gotta see the Conte thing out. It would be a bit. It's kind of like you're playing with house money a little bit. It'd be a bit. Well, now that I said it, like there could be like one last offer from Manchester City before they get sick of Tottenham's nonsense for Harry Kane, and January could be his last opportunity. But I don't think City are going to go in for him in January, are they?